off with this question, which is, who are the esports audience in 2021? It couldn't be a more open question. Lots of room to chat about it. I'll kick off with Mark there from Verizon. Your time at Intel, Verizon now. Who are the esports audience in 2021?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I'm going to give this a little bit of a tech nerd slash mobile slash all the stuff that I've done over the last 12 years. It's all rolled into one. I'll try to answer this with a forward-looking lens. I think with the rise of competitive mobile gaming, it's really democratizing esports in a way that we've never really been able to see before, right? So this actually puts esports in a much more accessible way than before. So if you're playing, if you're watching, pretty much across the board. And I think one thing to mention, right, is that esports, sometimes we just look at the big stadium type things. Johnny and I were geeking out about IEM before this, and it's like, that's not just esports, right? Esports is all levels of competitive play. Right. And I think mobile gaming and mobile competitive is a way that it's really just going to blow this out, democratize esports, and make it really accessible pretty much for anybody, anywhere. So I think that is something that's really unique for that audience for 21 and beyond.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Actually, I think we actually on the last panel I was part of, we discussed mobile gaming a lot actually as well. And you see games now like PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, PUBG Mobile. You see like Call of Duty Mobile. You see Wild Rift. The user base alone is on a different level. Like, it's absolutely huge. You're absolutely right there. So I think that's spot on. Let's come across to Dan as well. Same question to you. Like, what's your feeling on the esports audience in 2021?
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's super important that we first just remind ourselves of the fact that the gaming audience and the esports audience, that there is a definite difference between the audiences. I think one of the challenges within this space is that we all love big numbers, but more times than not, esports and gaming get to be somewhat conflated in the way the terms are used. And people tend to look at gaming audiences, right? And they're like, well, the average gamer is 35, 40 years old. And then they think that equates over to esports. I just wanted to clarify that is absolutely not the case, that the audience should keep in mind that there's a distinct difference between the esports audience, the esports enthusiast, if you will, and a gaming enthusiast. Outside of that, though, I mean, you can generalize that it's a fairly young audience. But the other thing that I would remind the audience is, when we talk about esports, we tend to use it in a very general term. Just as there is sports, hockey, the audience is much different than football. It's different than baseball. It's different than soccer. We need to remind ourselves that when you look at the esports audience, the behavioral differences and some of the demographic differences are going to be different between, individuals or groups that tend to follow Call of Duty versus a StarCraft.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're with regards to the age side of things as well. Like, we look at like some of the Fortnite World Cup and some of the big players are 12 years old. They're competing at that level. That's how young a lot of the gaming audience are now. It's not just that kind of 30 to 40 demographic as you mentioned there as well. So I'm with you 100%. I'm obviously keen to hear what Tricia's feelings are as well. Obviously, you've kind of worked across a whole different array of places within the esports world. What's your feeling on the esports audience in 2021?
All right, great question. I think similarly to Dan, I feel the same way. Gaming is very different than esports, and that includes the audience. And within esports, as we mentioned, like, sports is different, right? You can't say like, I'm a sports fan, but suddenly a football player or football fan is going to understand what a basketball fan likes. Sorry, my voice is cracking. So
nice. That sounds fun.
I guess I got too excited to talk about basketball and football. It's been a minute, and I made it to playoffs in my fantasy. So, all right.
Congratulations!
Thank you. So speaking about that, the audience, I think what we can think about is it's really broad. It can range from anywhere. I don't think we're just at a set demographic or bracket. I think we can generalize and look at different esports titles and have a general demographic for that, whether it be age or more female to male ratio, etc. But I think it's first, if you're trying to look at how you should approach esports and as a brand, you should first look at what is your goal and target, and then maybe narrow down the esport that you're focused on.
Excellent. Yeah,
I think actually, and if I can just jump in, I know my turn is next, but I totally agree with everything that my colleagues here at the panel just said. Because but having clarified that gaming isn't esports, they're not. I mean, there's overlap, right? But they're not the same. I think besides defining the actual demographic or profile of the audience, it's also an attitude kind of thing, and we're seeing a lot of new fans that choose esports over traditional sports, and I think that is fascinating. Like that kind of shift in mindset is really, really interesting, because they choose to focus on sports. I'm going to call it sports. I know that debate is really old. They focus on sports and entertainment content of things that they can also replicate, right? So I can watch a basketball game, and I love basketball. I know someone already complained about the Knicks finger, the foam finger. I apologize, but like I can watch a basketball game, but I'm not gonna play afterwards because I'm just stuck at home. Whereas I can watch like this CDL final, or I can watch any game and then play it online at home, and that makes me feel so connected with that. And I can watch my favorite pros play online, and then go and try to recreate their strategies. And I think that kind of connection with the audience, with the fan, it's much closer. And we've talked about the demographic approach of it, and I really like to highlight that attitude kind of thing, because that makes a world of a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely does. I was going to say, I mean, you're being a Knicks fan, Dan. Are you a Bulls fan? Is that a thing? Being in Chicago?
Yeah. But I originally grew up in New York, so I'm not a big Knicks fan, but I'll stay with the Bulls.
Okay. I mean, it's great to have your points around the kind of the demographics, the sport. I mean, there definitely is like a correlation between kind of traditional mainstream sports and esports, as well as you said, like the age old debate there, Johnny. But from a branding standpoint as well. I mean, creatively, what with gaming and what you have opportunities to do with it from a branding standpoint, is it, can you break outside of that mold of traditional sports and the way that they kind of tend to do their branding and is there more opportunity to be more creative? I'll go to you there, Mark.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And in fact, I feel like, I don't know, maybe because I've been in this space for so long, it's been like 12 years, that I'm a little bit tired, I think, of the esports and sports, debate. I think, sports lives as sports, esports lives as esports. Just because the names, sound the same, like, doesn't mean that they're the same animal, right? I think we just talked about that. And so I think being creative, absolutely. But I think there's a really unique approach with this audience, or audiences, right? I think Tricia really talked about the different audiences, which I completely agree on. Is, with this audience, like, you don't just come and do big flashy things, right? It's a combination of the big moments, like we did at the Super Bowl this year with our Fortnite stadium, where it was just like, it was a cool cultural moment, right? So that's important, but really being engaged with the audiences and the communities on a day-to-day basis, that's really unique to this, to this community, or these communities, that I think a lot of times traditional sports marketing doesn't really go as deep or stay as connected as frequently as these communities.
Yeah,
it's about creating like a long-standing relationship with the audience, right? So brands, like I see it as a fan, when you go in and someone just throws ads at me, it doesn't really create a connection. But when I see cool integrations into the content, activations with the players, really creating content that appeals to me as a fan, I end up like favoring that brand. I end up actually preferring that brand, or just seeing it with more positive eyes than maybe I've seen before. So it is really creating that kind of connection, and the opportunity in esports. I also think we're much more prone to humor. I'd say.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
feel kind of bad saying that, because it's not like that traditional sports are too serious, but there's like, we're very much open to being silly, being goofy, and creating some more internet age content, which is I personally just really like it. I just enjoy it all day.
Yeah. I mean, from a talent perspective, who kind of works kind of on a desk or kind of part of the lineup when it comes to the broadcast side of things, even small things now I'm seeing kind of changes in the way in which even like for such a long time that traditional broadcast, as you mentioned, sports, you see a lot of people wearing the kind of like the suit jackets, kind of wearing very smart, very kind of like as you would see on a professional kind of sports football weekend or whatever. Now it's kind of changing. I think gaming is like, hey, we're actually quite casual. And this is like, and cool. This is a very different world. And you're starting to see a change now, and even stylistically, the way that people are dressed and the way that they're kind of like approaching it, because it's not quite as. I think you're not kind of like stuck, like to that traditional sports anymore. It is something completely different, really. I mean, Dan, with from a campaign standpoint, I've seen you guys have worked with the likes of I think Turtle Beach and other brands as well, like this. Is there any kind of campaigns that you've worked on in particular that kind of stand out to you that were particularly good from a branding perspective that you thought really resonated with the gaming audience in the esports world?
So all of them.
Obviously, yeah.
But look, I mean, instead of addressing like one specific campaign, and honestly, like I could, as much as I would love to plug a lot of the work that we've done, one of the things that I just wanted to backtrack a little bit is one of the areas where I think the esports industry in general does itself a disservice, and gaming is included in this, is we tend to say, the audience is really going to be very vocal and a backlash if they don't like the way that something is presented, if they don't like the way that they're being engaged. I just wanted to be super careful, because the reality is that's pretty much true of anyone between 18 and 30 years of age. It's not just specific to esports and gaming. Quite frankly, I don't know why we tend to focus on that within this industry, because again, I think it does us a disservice. That being said, I also think there's a ton of huge opportunity. For a lot of brands that are learning about the space, the organization, the presentation of a broadcast, I think is fantastic, because it does fit somewhat of the traditional model. I think what a lot of brands don't understand is that esports in its modern presentation has really existed for about 15, 20 years, where I think agencies like my own, or people like myself, where we can help brands, is help them realize, like, look, even though you're seeing this really polished, cool thing in a broadcast, there's a lot going on within the scene that could really use a brand's help, right? That brand could actually bring a lot of value. When you go to, a tournament, it typically takes place over 2 or 3 times. There's a lot of downtime during a tournament, whether it's within the broadcast itself or it's at the venue. So there are all these terrific ways for brands to engage, not only within the broadcast itself, but at the venue itself. And I would just leave it my comment at that. Any brand manager, any CMO, anyone who's on the brand side, whether it's an agency or the brand, if you have not been to an event, I know it's been difficult, obviously, for the last year, but I would encourage everyone to actually go to an event and hang out for a couple of days, and it gives you a totally different perspective on the audience as well as the industry.
Yeah, I think, Dan, you really nailed it when you said the word value, right? Like brand and value. So coming from the brand side, I think it's really important to really have an ethos where you act to deliver more value than you act to extract value, right? So if you are coming in as a brand, and I'm not trying to be preachy or anything like that, just making all the mistakes from the brand side and learn and taking the lumps, is that you really got to come in and deliver the value to the communities versus coming in and trying to, from day one, extract value. I think that's a really key paradigm and mindset to have in order to be successful and to have longevity within the communities.
Sure. I completely. I think you're right, Val. There is a lot of. I think longevity is really key.